Hey everybody, this is Mr. Perry, and I'm excited to share with you the basics and the finer details to a professional delivery. So this is my official presentation covering, really sort of the fundamentals of how to give a good quality presentation, how to score a high grade with your teacher or professor, but more importantly, really how to connect with your audience while you're up in front of them, and how to deal with the very common experience of speech anxiety. So take it all in and see what ideas stick with you, and hopefully some of this is pertinent and you'll put it to good use. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing you want to do when you're approaching a speech or a presentation, I think it's super important as a speaker to consider the audience's point of view. Put yourself in the seat of the audience and ask yourself, how would I want this information to be delivered to me? What makes it interesting or important to me? And how can I be sure to communicate that with my audience and to keep them engaged, right? So just if you approach your presentation from the audience's point of view, I think that in and of itself will do quite a bit to elevate the overall quality of what you present to them. Now, another key thing to consider is that you want to project confidence. Even if you are the kind of person who struggles from speech anxiety and public speaking fear, just whatever you can do to project confidence is really important. We are often our own worst critics when it comes to presentations. You'll remember every time you slip up and stutter and whatever, but most of those things the audience doesn't remember. They just really are interested in your ideas and what you want to present. So if you can keep that in mind, I think that will help build your confidence and help you project that confidence throughout. And then finally, if you want to project confidence, the best thing to do is to follow the KISS principle, which stands for keep it simple, stupid. All right, this idea that if you just make your workload as manageable as possible from beginning to end, it'll make the entire experience much more easy for you. So now, after you consider the speech from the audience's point of view and you start thinking about your topic, now you want to think about your visual aid. So with visual aids, we have a lot to get into here. First off, visual aids are intended to be, like the title says, a visual aid, not a visual distraction. So you've got to be somewhat judicious in terms of how much animation you put in there, how many words you put in there, how fancy you make your designs. More importantly, you want to try to limit your wording for your audience. I would recommend having a 15-word average. So you might have some slides that only have a few words, maybe 10, and then you might have a few slides that have, maybe 18 or 20. But if you make it your goal to limit your wording to 15 words only on any given slide, then that is another thing that you can do to make it easier for your audience. And then visual aids should blend images and text. So whatever image you're including on your slide, it should logically connect to the ideas being presented on that slide. I want to go back to this concept of right here of limiting your wording. So very often I will see students in a computer lab working on a visual aid, and they'll open up a PowerPoint slide or a Google slide, and they will basically start typing their script. They will type out complete sentences. They'll have entire paragraphs on there. And I get it. You basically want to get all of your ideas down, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. But if you're the kind of person who likes to put entire sentences and like full paragraphs on a slide, go ahead and do that. Write out all of your words and create all of your slides. But then what I would do is I would make a copy of that file, and I would tag the second copy with something like, for presentation or something like that. And then on that second copy of it, go through and dramatically limit your wording and cut it down to just the main ideas, just the phrases and the keywords that are most important. What you can then do is you can print that original version that has all of your text on there, and you can use those as your presentation notes even if you want to, or you can use those to rehearse. But that's one of the ways that you can, I think, make good use of your lab time and your preparation time. So remember the purpose of a visual aid, all right? The purpose of a visual aid is to help engage the audience. You want your audience looking at you, taking in your ideas, and the visual aid should help them do that. Again, if you have way too many words on a slide, or if it's distracting, your audience spends more time reading your slides and working on looking at your slides than they do listening to you and paying attention to your ideas. Your visual aid should just present an outline of ideas, and it should provide visuals. It should provide some way to help the audience visualize what's happening. So some habits to avoid. This is an example of a slide that is just way, way, way too complex. This is, I think of a bit of an exaggeration, but obviously somebody put a lot of time and effort into putting this together, and they might expect a good grade because holy cow, look at all this work I put into this. But this really is not an effective visual aid. Anybody who sees this during a presentation from an audience's point of view, they're not even gonna really look at it at all because it's impossible to take in all of these words, right? So that's something, a way of visualizing, what an overly cluttered slide might look like. Here's another one. Some people like to find these really cool and beautiful and interesting looking backgrounds, and they'll cover the entire slide with this really cool background, but then they'll try to superimpose text on top of it. And very often, if your background design is way too ornate or too complex, then the words that you're trying to put over it are just really hard to read. They blend in. So that's something to consider, as well as, how can you avoid this kind of a construction. And then finally, you got to remember that people are going to read any word that you put on your slide. So don't forget to proofread. You proofread your essays before you turn them into your teacher. You should probably proofread your slides as well. So that's a really important thing to do ahead of time. Okay, let's move on. Let's start talking about how you're most likely going to be assessed or graded during a presentation. So one thing that most teachers and professors look for is just general organization. Very similar to an essay, you can think of a presentation as having the same basic organization. So you would start with some kind of introduction. It's always good to try to hook your audience, come up with something that helps engage them, maybe encourages them to participate, but you want to have some kind of invitation for the audience to say, hey, I'm about to give you a lot of information, and this is really good information for you to know. This is how it's going to benefit you, and this is why it's potentially important. So try to figure out what you can do to kind of hook your audience at the beginning. The body, obviously, is just going to be all of the information. And then the conclusion, you want to, again, have some kind of formal conclusion. You don't want to just say, well, thanks, I'm done. You want to, again, reinforce those main ideas. So it's a good idea to think about whatever you present in your introduction to try to return to maybe some of those ideas in the conclusion. And if you speak with more than one speaker, if you're presenting with more than one speaker, if you're doing like a symposium style like you see here, you want to have transitions from speaker to speaker. So keep that in mind as well. Next, on top of the actual organization of the ideas, you're also going to be assessed on your overall, your nonverbal communication, right? So there's your posture, your eye contact, the volume of your voice, and how your voice sounds, the tone of your voice. Your teachers always say, avoid sounding monotone. So here's where those conscious choices that I ask you to make really come into play. And these items that you see right here are really basic, and whatever choices you decide to incorporate, you want to show them as evidence of practice. And really, this is in red because this is the most important thing I think that most teachers and professors are looking for in a presentation, is they want concrete evidence that you practiced this presentation and you're not just up there winging it for the first time. So the more you can do to push this, the more likely it is that you're going to get a high score. So step 4, do your homework. There's a bit of homework that is involved with presentations. Aside from developing your visual aid, you probably want to develop some note cards or have some kind of notes to work off of. So if you do note cards, you want to develop those note cards and number them. Make sure you number them. The nightmare scenario is when somebody gets up to give a presentation and then they drop like 12 note cards and they get scattered and disorganized, and then suddenly they have to try to get them back in order. It's a lot easier if you have them numbered. And then another thing to do is to think about, just like in an essay, you want to try to impress the reader maybe with some interesting, unique, or poetic or creative wording. You should absolutely try to incorporate that into a presentation as well. It's always nice to earn some style points in terms of, again, throwing out a nice poetic phrase to the audience, incorporating a little alliteration into your wording. Anything you can do to add, that element of surprise, showing off your language skills on top of your presentation skills, that's kind of the icing on the cake, and it almost guarantees that you're going to get an A on this kind of an assignment. Now, this is a really interesting idea that was presented to me a while ago. Consider with your note cards using only symbols or key ideas only, all right? So I used to teach a class that, one of the presentations that students did was a how-to presentation. And I kept some of the note cards that students did for this. So I'm gonna say right now, why don't you pause the video and read these 4 note cards and try to get an idea of what was this person about to present, what was the topic this person was about to present. I'll give you a hint. All of these sets of note cards, these were all how-to presentations. So this is a how-to, but just pause it really quick, read over, and see if you can figure out what this is about. Okay, so I'm hoping you paused and you made a guess. You might have noticed that we've got some drawings that look a little bit like hairstyles, and the final step being hairspray, the warning being heat, and picking your style. This is just about doing your hair, how to do your hair in the morning, what are some different hairstyles that you can do to get ready. And this was a presentation that was designed for people with longer hair, all right? Here's another one. So again, I encourage you to pause the video, read over these note cards, and try to consider what you think this person might have been presenting for their how-to speech. Okay, if you paused the video, you might have taken some time to look at some of the clues that you have, some of the images, antisocial disorder. We've got something about annoying or irritation, some strange things going on here, and then you see that appears maybe to be a pistol, gas plus fire. I see some weapons, and then suddenly I see Albert Fish, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Ted, which we can assume is possibly Ted Bundy. So believe it or not, this was a presentation on how to be an effective serial killer. All right, let's look at one more. All right, we have 6 note cards this time. Again, I'll just ask you to pause the video, read them over, see if you can figure out what this person's presentation topic was about. Okay, if you took the time to pause the video, you probably read over a lot of the words. You can notice again, there's only a few words on each slide, and this is on each note card. And this is so that the speaker will avoid reading and looking down all the time. If you avoid doing complete sentences or whole paragraphs for your presentation note cards, if you only give yourself, again, those key words to cue your key ideas and allow you to keep, speaking comfortably, then this is what that might look like. So reading through, you might have guessed that this was how to tie-dye a shirt. So that's what this person was doing. Anyways, this might not work for everybody, but I just think it's a really intriguing idea to try out and see how it works. As long as you know your topic and you're speaking about a topic that you are familiar with, you should be able to pull off something like this, and you're going to have much more consistent and strong eye contact with your audience. So now we're going to move on a little bit more with doing your homework. Again, ahead of time, before the presentation, practice. Practice it out loud. Make sure that you're speaking the words out loud. I say the magic number is 3. All right, practice it once, practice it again, practice it a 3rd time, call it good. Don't make yourself crazy practicing, something like a dozen times, trying to perfect every little thing. Nobody's perfect when it comes to a presentation. You just have to accept that you're going to make some mistakes, and that's okay. Keep it simple. Keep the workload manageable. Practice it 3 times out loud. Practice with your visual aid. And if you do it 3 times, you're probably going to nail it. I find that 3 is kind of the sweet spot for presentations. And then the day before your presentation, here is where you want to identify your conscious choices. I've got the menu of items that you can choose from for nonverbal communication posted at my Weebly. If you click on the Speeches and Presentations tab, the menu is posted there. It's just a good idea to go through and say, okay, well, what would be appropriate for my presentation? What are some words or some phrases I would want to emphasize? How would I want to emphasize them? What tone would I want to strike? And then choose some of the body language cues that you can do, hand gestures, facial expressions, whole body movement, whatever it happens to be, and try to be as specific and purposeful as you can. If you're going to say you're going to make a specific hand gesture, maybe you're going to clap your hands. Well, when are you going to do that? When would it make sense to actually clap your hands in your presentation? What slide? What idea? What word, right? Try to make it as intentional and purposeful as possible. And it says take charge, all right? If you are a nervous person, if you know you're going to probably shake a little bit, if you know you're going to maybe stutter a little bit or giggle a little bit, because those are just, those nervous habits that you have when you present, take charge of them. Use them in your presentation. If you're the kind of person who, gets a little shaky, then feel free to move around, move your arms constantly, walk around constantly, do whatever you can to let out some of that nervous energy. If you're the kind of person who giggles a little bit, then, again, maybe try to work laughter into your presentation. Allow it to happen. Try to use it to your advantage if you possibly can. And so there you go. Hopefully this helps. Anytime you need to deliver a presentation, whether it's for your high school English class, maybe a college level class, maybe you find yourself in the honored position of speaking at somebody's wedding, all of these ideas, all of these key ideas, I think, are super important to allowing you to deal with any fear or anxiety, allow you to connect with your audience, and to use all of your tools that are out there, to use your body, your voice, and your visual aids to help make those strong connections with your audience. Remember, you want to try to project confidence. You want to try to keep it as simple as possible with your visual aid, your note cards, and your content. And don't forget to practice 3 times. And if you do all that, you might find yourself on the TED Talk stage in the near future. Thanks for watching.